Hey guys, what's up? How you doing? And welcome back to the channel. Today I've got, well, at long last, I've got another Wars of Arda battle for you. This is yet another one played between Bilbo, Argus, myself, and Tunnel Snake. Although this is from a few days ago, from the day of recording. So it's probably a week or so between us playing the battle and you seeing it on YouTube. In this battle, this is actually having a look at the complete rebalance we're doing right now. Obviously, the faction identities will remain the same. It's just a case of we're making sure that everything's on a clean slate, ready for the next public build we release, which hopefully isn't going to be too far away. But I do just want to warn you that it could be a little while to wait for this. But let's get into the army comps, starting with myself, where I brought 2 units of heavy Flathrum Sea Guard. Now, one big thing about all of the Elven factions now is going to be the fact that they will have extremely low numbers. Most of their units will have less than 100 men, and in fact, I think the only Elven units that might have more would be the Wood Elves, potentially, with the High Elves having slightly less, for just due to the fact that they're closer to the sea, I think. But yeah, so 2 units of heavy Flathrum Sea Guard. These guys, they're not the most elite, but they are very elite pikes, although that does come with the caveat of having very low numbers. These guys I'll just be looking for to hold down a front line, really. I brought the Arbany a Arendil, who are a 2 HP unit. My bodyguard isn't in these guys, but they're just a 2 HP sword and board unit. Far lower numbers than most other sword and board bodyguards. However, they are extremely elite. And I brought 4 units of Wardens of Mithland. I am tempted to chop down the Wardens of Mithland before the red down to 3 again, as opposed to 4, but for now this is what we've got. Although Lindon will be getting another look at very soon, when I look at Arthur Dane as well and put some new models in for both Lindon and Gondor. Then we've got the Arbany Ecthelion, another Lindon bodyguard tier unit. They've got 3 2-foot base and 1 heavy knight unit. But the Arbany Ecthelion, 43 men in a unit, but they are extremely elite 2 HP units, wielding those massive 2-handed swords. They're currently, out of the factions we've got balanced, the most elite unit in the game, man to man. So that should be very interesting. However, that does come with the caveat of them having only 43 men in the unit, so it's a bit of swings and roundabouts. Then this is probably the first big change other than numbers to a unit, and that is the heavy Flathrum archers. Now, both of the Flathrum's basic archers they're still archers. However, instead of being just 1-handed swordsmen in melee, these guys are now 2-handed glaives. So they've got AP and, well, they're not glaives so much as they're 2-handed spears, but they've got AP, decent charge bonus, and they will just be incredibly potent, even once they're out of ammo, to bring them more in line with the other Elven units. My general is in one of these 2 units of heavy Flathrum archers. Now the Wardens of Mithland, these guys are very low armor, not armor, in number, but they can hide, and they do have a few volleys of arrows before they charge into melee with shield and AP spear. So they're going to be a very nice unit to use. They've got the heavy Flathrum Glaive Guard. These guys, again, 2-handed shocks spears with AP, so they're kind of like halberds but without the formation, is probably the best way to describe them. So they've got decent charge bonus, AP, decent against cav. They're just pretty decent all-rounders. However, the lack of a shield does mean that they are somewhat less resistant to missile attacks. Then 4 units of heavy Flathram shipwrights. These guys are javelins before becoming spear and shield in melee, so that's a pretty nice combo. Just the AP javelin precursor mixed with the resilience that they offer front line is going to be extremely important. However, again, like all the other Flathram units, they do have only 93 men in a unit. Then we move on to the 2 units of Flathram wave breaks I brought. These guys AP Macemen with a shield value. Again, they're very elite for a low tier unit, but that does come with the drawback of them only having 93 men in each unit. However, against units like what are on the field, they will rip and tear through them. However, again, the low numbers will set them back somewhat. Then I have also brought a couple units of Flathram shipwrights. These guys, non-AP Javies, which, however, they do have more javelins, and they are sword and board in melee, which means that they will dish out damage faster, but also take damage a lot faster than their heavy counterparts. Then, I think that's everything I brought. Pikes, 4 units of them. 2 units of Glaive Guard, 4 units of these, 2 bodyguards, 2 of those, 2 of these, 2 of those. That looks about right. Then my ally Tunnel Snake playing as Gondor. He's brought a couple units of Gondor Great Spears. These guys just basic pikes. That shield on their back will keep them alive from arrow fire and in melee slightly longer, but most pikes now, they rely relatively heavily on their formation to stay alive. However, the armor plate on these guys will keep them alive for that bit longer. However, again, a big change to the Gondor base stuff is that they rely on their armor far more than they did in the previous build. However, that won't do them too badly because, again, you'd still need a decent AP unit to deal with them. Now, the Axemen of Lasarnak, these guys are one of the fiefdom units for Gondor. You can see there they've got that little shield, so that's going to provide them a little bit of defense against ranged. But again, 2-handed axes, they're not going to be the most resilient in melee. They'll focus more on getting their damage off quickly and efficiently, as opposed to staying alive to deal it that bit slower. Now, Gondor Sword Infantry, just Gondor's basic troops, really. These guys, nothing too special. They're just very heavily armoured, so that should keep them alive through a decent amount of punishment, really. However, again, if you can get some decent AP into them, they will get whooped relatively handily, especially if it's AP to the back. That 8 shield value from that shield will keep them alive from the front decently well still. Now, Blackroot Vale Hunters, these guys are a new type of troop called Assault Troop, which, again, the Wardens of Midland, they also fall under that, insofar as they have a few volleys of arrows or crossbows, in the case of Rune's Assault Troop, and then they're just decent melee combatants, almost like a hybrid but with lower ammo. So these guys, in particular, are 2-handed swords, as are the Perithil Foresters over in Dol Amroth, who perform a very similar role, albeit a lower number due to being elves. I believe you can bring less of the Perithil than these guys as well. So just a relatively cheap, well, I say relatively, they're 700, but they can get a good amount of damage off of 700 florins. Then back here we've got a unit of Wardens of Minas Ithil. These guys, 2 hit points. They've got Zweihanders and steel bows, so they're going to get a ton of damage downrange, before then whipping out those steel 2-handed swords and just wrecking face in melee. And then in this section of his army, he's also, I think it's this section at least, but he's also brought the Hallowed Knights of Amon Anwar. So they are a very, very potent 3 HP legendary unit with, I believe, AP and just very, very nice melee stats. We've got a couple of units of Lamidan Nobles. These guys, they're pretty solid. In the next test version we have, they will be regaining their Unbreakable. But for the purposes of this, I believe they have 16 morale, so they'll still fight a decent amount, but they will still retreat. They will also be getting a slight visual overhaul courtesy of Bilbo. Now these guys, they've got their armor upgrades, so they're going to be even more resilient than normal. And two-handed, just being a two-handed relatively elite, I say they're upper mid-tier swords that they are. They can get a decent chunk of kills off before falling by the wayside. A unit of Fountain Guard and Nimloth, these guys just... they're basically just far superior Gondor Great Spears. They got better armor. The only thing they really fall short on is the fact they don't have a shield. But the fact they're an AP pike more than makes up for that fact. And of course they're an elite AP pike, so they've got decent stats to back it up. Not as good stats as if it was a Fountain Guard and Nimloth that was a shield and spear, or a sword and board, but pretty noticeable stats for a polearm unit. Then he's also brought a unit of dismounted Knights of Nimloth. These guys, of course, the sword and board version of the Fountain Guard of Nimloth, so they're just gonna rip and tear until it is done. And yeah, I don't think any of the orcs are gonna enjoy facing these guys today. I think that's it for Tunnel Snakes. I might have missed something, but I don't believe I have. So I would say it's an upper tier army with a decent chunk of low tier mixed in, which is what you'd kind of expect to see from a Gondor army. I would say you'd expect to have a decent amount of the basic Gondor troops mixed in with some of the fiefdom and of course the Nimloth units. And of course that extra spending he did on the Hallowed Knights of Amon Anwar is naturally going to mean that he has less money to spend, so he's going to have to complement it with a slightly more Gondor base units. Now onto Bilbo's army. He's brought a few units of Black Orc Halberds. I believe it's 4 of them. So these guys are just a very low tier halberd unit, but there's 253 of them in each unit, so they've got the numbers to back up that AP phalanx. However, they don't have the stats to, so if that formation is actually buckled, then they're going to be in for a not a fun time. Tower Roman Woodsman, again, these guys have that AP. They've got a minus shield value due to that wooden shield on their back, but these guys are naturally the Wayne's lowest tier melee unit. They're going to be up to almost nothing in melee. However, against something like a Gondor sword infantry, they could get a decent amount of damage off, at least higher than their pay grade. In behind these, we've got the Tower Roman Hunters. Again, they are non-AP javelins. So against my lighter troops, they'll do fine, but against anything else, they won't do too much. However, they are one-handed axemen in melee, I believe. So, at the very least, they can get some damage downrange that way. And of course, they are ridiculously cheap and decently high in number. So, they're always worth it if you've got 400, 500 florins left and nothing else to spend it on. More Black Orc Halberds. Here we've got the Wolfborn Fanatics. I believe these are unbreakable. I believe they have AP, but don't quote me on that. I will have to check at a later date, so I will know if we ever see them again. But they're an upper mid-tier unit for the Confederacy of the Wain, I would say. Not as high tier as the mountain units, but also far superior to something like Tower Roman. And even the Variags, I think they're better than. So these guys, they're just a very good all-round unit for you to bring, and you don't lose out on the numbers with them, with 170 men in each unit. There we have another unit of Tower Roman Hunters, a few units of Thralls of the Eye. Now these guys are essentially Mordor's cheap crap to throw at the enemy. They cost, I think it's 250 to 300 florins to bring a unit of them, and you get 4 before the red. Now, one big thing to note is that the human elements of Gorgoroth actually have lower numbers than the orc elements. That's just because Thralls of the Eye, you wouldn't really corral them into fighting a war for you. naturally, I would imagine that Gorgoroth would use them to like build their stuff, as opposed to die on the front line so that an orc might survive 1 second longer. Now here, in amongst these guys, we've got the Acolytes of the Eye. These guys, relatively cheap two-handed swords, so again, they're not going to be anything too special, but they do have that chanting thing which will lower morale in a radius around them. And again, two-handed swords, so they're not the worst unit in the world. They're far superior to Thralls of the Eye, Tarim Hunters, and probably the Black Orcs as well, I would say. However, that lack of armor they have will still set them back against any kind of non-AP damage, especially if it comes from something like the Lambadin Nobles. Here we've got some more Black Orc Halberds, even more Black Orc Halberds. Now, Argus has splashed the cash on 2 units of Hwachers. Now, the thing about Hwachers is I would say they probably have the lowest ceiling in terms of the kills they can get. However, you are usually... the chances are, if you bring a Hwacher, you're going to get a decent amount of value off with it. It's going to get some kills purely because of the sheer amount of ground it covers with that damage. However, it is also more likely to get friendly fire, although again, it's likely to get friendly fire in smaller bursts. And you're likely to get less of it over the course of an entire battle if you do get friendly fire. It's brought a couple of units of Mountain Bowmen. Now these guys are unbreakable, so they're just extremely potent, especially with those Fauxes that they have, as well as the fact that they're just archers, so they're not half bad at range either. Wain Archers, of course, are a relatively low tier archer unit, but there's 150 of them, and they're pretty cheap, so if you end up wasting a decent chunk of ammo with them, you won't be too upset. It's more a case of your opponent won't want them to get damage off, but they also won't want to use too much of their ammo on them. So whatever happens, it's a pretty much win-win situation. There's another unit of Mountain Bowmen. Bilbo has brought a bunch of units of... if I can find them. He's brought a bunch of units of Ranger Guard of Gorgoroth. So those guys, they can naturally hide anywhere, but they're basically got Mordor's decent archer for the men. Obviously, you've got the Wardens of the Eye, who are just far superior. They're steel bows, they're heavily armoured, and of course, they're just better in melee. But Range Guard of Gorgoroth aren't anything to sniff at. Here we've got some Azwar Champions. These guys, they are 2 hit point pole arms, so they could be a massive pain to break through, especially if they can hold that formation for as long as they need to. That looks like it might be a slight visual glitch, but I'm not sure. I'll have to take a look at that. But these guys are very, very potent if unflanked, and even when flanked, they can keep themselves alive better than most. Mostly because of that second hit point, but of course, being a bodyguard tier unit, they are still very, very talented. Then the Mountain Champions, a very, very elite two-handed sword infantry, which I do believe has AP. And that little buckler will keep them alive slightly longer than they would be if they didn't have it. So these guys, they are extremely scary. If they can get a charge off, it will wreck so much stuff, especially if it relies on armor. And even if it doesn't, taking a charge from those guys isn't going to be much fun. Now, Mountain Spear Guard, they are I believe they've got AP javelins, but they then turn into spearmen in melee. So they are also unbreakable, like all of the other mountain units, the champions included. These guys are unbreakable, relatively decently armored, so they're relatively resilient, but again, they are evil men, so no matter how elite they are still going to be outclassed by something like elves. But they are still very, very good for their cost. Now, Bilbo's brought 2 units of Castellans of the Eye. These guys, two-handed swordsmen, very, very elite. They could definitely go up against something like mid-tier elves. Definitely not the high-tier elves, but the mid-tier elves, they could definitely beat them with a good 30 men to spare, I would say. Potentially 40 or 50 if the elves don't have AP. Then Inquisitors of the Eye, Shield and Mace. They're not quite as potent as the Archpriests of Anatar just there, but they can keep themselves alive that bit longer, which means that if you commit them to prevent a front line from falling apart, they will do exactly that, and they'll get plenty of kills while doing so. Now, the Archpriests of Anatar are just very aggressive. They have less melee defense than something like the Inquisitors of the Eye. However, they will just absolutely wreck face. And that AP they have means that armor won't save you. Probably the best way to deal with them would be an AP bodyguard tier unit of your own, or like shooting them with the AP missiles. Oh wait, I did miss 2 units of Plymouth Galen Knights, which could very easily cause the defenders some issues. 53 men in the unit, they're a unit of shock cav, so they can do a lot of work off the charge. But anyway, back to the defenders. We've got 2 units of Wardens of the Eye here. These guys, they turn into... They're still bows at range, but then they are two-handed swords in melee. Not as good two-handed swords as something like the Castellans of the Eye, but they are still very, very potent. And of course, the Ranged Guard of Gorgoroth, he's brought 4, I believe, of them, which are a relatively cheap, I think it's 650 florins, but they're a relatively cheap, I would say, mid-tier unit of archers. You can see them here. They've got decent armor, and then they're dual-wielding swords in melee. But without further ado, let us begin. And already you can see that the Philathron Waybreakers are just getting involved in fighting these Black Orc Halberds here. And it's not looking too hot for them. They're down to 213 men. However, what I didn't realise was that putting my army here, I'm under direct fire from Argus's Hawatcher. So I'm desperately trying to run my stuff away from there, but not before he torches about 100 of my guys. Yeah, about 4% of our army just got flame grilled by that Hawatcher. So that wasn't too good. And the fact there's 2 of them will just mean that we have to worry about it for that bit longer, which is not something you want to do at all. Now, the Acolytes of the Eye here, it looks like they've sort of been just left to die. The Plymouth Galen Knights did charge in, but I'm fairly sure there was a unit of... Yeah, there were a couple units of Tower Roman Woodsmen hiding, so they just disrupted the charge. However, that was a much nicer one. I think that killed about 40 or so of those Acolytes of the Eye. Now I've got a unit of Philathron Waybreakers here, just trying to grind their way through, yeah, more Tower Roman Woodsmen, and you guessed it, even more Black Orc Halberds. And Bilbo's just trying to just move all of his Thralls of the Eye around, and just trying to envelop this unit of Philathron Waybreakers, which is not a bad idea. I should have definitely been more focused on just making sure that this didn't happen. If I had to charge my unit of Philathron Shipwrights in, that's just what I should have done. However, you can see here, these Philathron Waybreakers, they may be low number, but these Black Orc Halberds are certainly no match for them. And these Philathron Waybreakers, while they are shaken, they're still getting some decent kills. They're up to, it looks like, around 100 or so. However, I don't know how many of those kills from javelins. What I should have done was charge this unit of Philathron Shipwrights in and just stop this unit from routing. But I don't, and these guys rout to 54 men, which that hurt to see. Now, Tunnelsake's got his Blackroot Vale Hunters, just shooting into the back of these Tower Roman Hunters and Black Orc Halberds. Not Hunters, Woodsmen. I've got this unit of Philathron Shipwrights just desperately holding while I just shoot these Black Orc Halberds with javelins from these Philathron Shipwrights. which I mean, it's not going too badly. These Taroman hunters that are out of ammo, you can see there they've got hatchets. Charge into melee, right side charge in a couple of units of my heavy flattering glaive guard. Now these guys being AP shock spears, they're going to do work. Of the mountain bowmen that Args is committing now, definitely in the attempt to alleviate the pressure somewhat. And already you can just see how chaotic this front line is. This unit here is doing God's work, just absolutely mullering Black Orc halberds, Thralls of the Eye. This unit of Taroman woodsmen should, honest to God, probably just commit themselves here. This unit of Flatham shipwrights is just desperately holding the line, however, they're not going to be able to do that for too much longer. This unit of Flatham shipwrights is just ensuring that these Wolfborn fanatics aren't able to outflank me here, because that, I believe, would go very badly wrong. I'm moving up a unit of heavy Flatham shipwrights just to try and get some jabbies into these Wolfborn fanatics. Now, over on Tunnel Snake's side, he's just starting it off nicely with some Gondor sword infantry and a unit of Gondor great spears, which are doing exceptionally well, just slowly grinding their way through these Taroman woodsmen and just holding them at bay. Meanwhile, these Gondor sword infantry aren't doing too badly purely because of that armor. The Acolytes of the Eye, Black Orc halberds, Taroman woodsmen, who aren't actually in melee, but the Thralls of the Eye, most of those won't do too well against them, with, I would say, the exception of Black Orc halberds purely because of the formation and the AP. However, with the addition of a unit of Blackroot Vale hunters, well, they're not the most resilient unit. I would expect them to be able to grind their way through a unit of Black Orc halberds relatively easily. Maybe not as easy as I'm thinking, because they are still going at them from the front, but the Black Orc halberds will not view that as nice an engagement as they would have not so long ago. Now the Hawatra is just going in because I have committed my Albany Earendil, and Args and Bilbo just really do not want these guys to be alive. You can see there, these guys just grinding their way through the Thralls of the Eye with impunity. So if Hawatra shot hits, then, you know, that's very, very good kills. You can also see here it got a decent amount of good kills on me, although it did also get some friendly fire, of course. But I'm putting my Albany Earendil back because I just don't want them getting shot by the Hawatra, to be completely honest. And also, since I've added them, I definitely think these Falathrin Waybreakers can just beat back these 86 Thralls of the Eye. Now these heavy Falathrin Glaive Guard, one of the units has just gone down a decent amount, and they're just trying to flood us with numbers, which isn't a bad shout. If you couldn't just overwhelm elves, of course, they'll still rout. It'll just take more. You can see here these guys routing. So I'm just desperately, I know these guys can hold the line for a decent amount, even when getting outflanked by Wolfborn fanatics. So I just task them with doing that while I jab these Wolfborn fanatics with AP jabbies, of course. I believe that was the last few that went in just there. And so I can charge these heavy Flathrim shipwrights in. I'm sending my elven arrows to shoot the back of these halberds here because, again, the less of these that Tomsake has to grind his way through, the better. And also it will mean that this cavalry will actually be able to do a bit more. Even so, that's a pretty solid charge there, netting about 25-30 kills for a Tunnel Snake, which is exactly what you want to see. But this front line is starting to look somewhat undermanned, so I'd hope that Tunnel Snake's about to commit some more units to that. Unless he's hoping that, though that said, there's 60 Blackroot Vale Hunters, you got a unit of Lambden Nobles. That front line doesn't look too bad. My Flathrin Waybreakers, now that these Taroman Woodsmen have committed themselves, they are just so low in number that even their highest skill won't be enough to save them, and they will slowly but surely die. However, this is where I decide to commit 1 unit of Wardens of Mithland, just because I need to keep this going, and the Wardens of Mithland will just be able to destroy these guys easily. Just the sheer resilience that they possess will mean that the Towerman Woodsmen don't really stand a chance. Now, what I am tempted to do is make it so that the Wardens of Mithland are... Basically, you've got your Forlond, Harlond, and Mithland units. I'm tempted to make it so the Mithland units are slightly more elite than the Harlond units still. Well, Harlond and Forlond. But back to the battle here, you can see these Gondor sword infantry just providing numbers to these heavy Flathrum shipwrights. And these Wolfborn fanatics won't be feeling too good about that. Hawatcha shots going in, just trying to deal with my pikes, it appears. And also, getting kills on the Wardens of Mithland, it's nothing to snooze at. However, this was far more unfortunate in terms of friendly fire. Yet, as I say that, it did still net him a lot of good kills on my forces. But it does unfortunately rout about half of this front line, allowing Tunnel Snakes to sneak his Pinneth Galen Knights in. Which is not something you want if you're the defenders, it has to be said. But the Javelins coming in, of course Javelins now being very, very good against cavalry. You can already see even those low tier Javelins netting about 3 kills in that. I don't even think that was half a volley. So that is very, very solid from them. I'm sending a few arrows into these guys and then charging in with my heavy Flathrum Glaive Guard. Because again, heavy Flathrum Glaive Guard will just absolutely rip these guys to shreds. Even just having 34 Wardens of Mithland, these guys shouldn't do too badly against the Towerman Woodsman, shitty because of the difference in quality there. Wardens of Mithland being a very high tier Elven unit, and then Towerman Woodsman being the lowest of the low from the Wainriders. It's just not really a contest. These Pinneth Galen Knights just charging into the range guard of Gorgoroth here. Again, not the greatest charge, but it's also not the worst I've seen. And getting a rear charge into these Towerman Woodsman and Blackhawk Halberds, again, they are not going to feel too good about that. But at this point, Argus decides, hey, you know what, let's switch the targets up slightly, and goes for Tunnel Snake's front line instead. And that is going to be a lot of kills on these Gondor Great Spears here. I think that was about 50. Got some good kills on the Lambton Nobles as well. At this point, he probably should have tried to retreat these Towerman Woodsmen. As soon as the Pinneth Galen Knights managed to get their weasel their way in, I would have just desperately tried to pull them back, but you can only do so much. And at this point, Bilbo, he's had enough. He's just shooting these guys, these Pinneth Galen Knights, with everything he's got. And I was hoping that Tunnel Snake was going after the Hawatcha there with those Pinneth Galen Knights. Very, very good catch to stop them charging straight into those Azwar champions as well there. Otherwise, that would have gone extremely, extremely badly. Instead, deciding to charge these Towerman Hunters. These Heavy Flathrum Sea Guard now just getting their way into the melee here. These Towerman Hunters are my Sea Guard even getting into these Towerman Hunters, and they're not going to feel too good about that, I don't think. And indeed, there we go. That's 80 of them routing. If we look at the kills here, you can see we're way ahead. However, everything we've killed has just been chaff. And while most of what Tunnel Snake's committed was chaff, I've lost a decent amount of my elites here. I've committed my Heavy Flathrum Glaive Guard, they're almost spent. I've committed a unit of Wardens of Mithland, who are almost spent. One of my units of Pikes has lost 60 of its men. And while, yeah, a decent amount of what I lost was my low tier stuff, everything over here of losses from the Hawatcha, that is not particularly low tier stuff. All of that stuff is costing over 800 or so florins. And of course, I've committed a unit of Heavy Flathrum Shipwrights, and I believe they're all dead, pretty much. Maybe not. Heavy Flathrum Archers, these guys are relatively intact, but my General's unit of Heavy Flathrum Archers is certainly not. They're down to about 60. I've lost one of my Arbni Ecthelion, lost a couple of my Arbni Eorando. So, I mean, I'm not looking peachy here, and we've still got a lot of elites to deal with. We've got the Bodyguard tier unit here. We've got Bilbo's 2 Bodyguard tier units. And we're not even sure if that Hawatch is out of ammo left. It's got so many kills, and we're not sure if it's out of ammo. Alright, no, the Heavy Flathrum shipwrights are just about still alive. There's only 36 of them left, though, so there's not going to be too much they can do. And of course, this is a relatively solid defensive position. There's a decent amount of mountain units here. Show them that they've got a lot of AP left. A couple of units of Wain Archers who, while they're not going to be up to too much, it's just another 300 men that can A, fire arrows, and B, do okay in melee. Not to mention the 4 units of Range Guard of Gorgoroth who have decent enough armor to keep them alive if things come to require that. Now the ones of the eye here, the 2 units of them, they're another very, very worrying unit is probably the right term for it. They're going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with. At this point, I'm just trying to shoot the Hawatcher with my Ones of Mithland ammo, but nothing's really happening, so I do eventually decide to change the targeting of that. Now, the Wain Archers are just, combined with the Ranger Guard of Gorgoroth, are just absolutely melting this unit of Gondor Great Spears. However, I'm charging up some of my Heavy Flathrum just as an attempt to show willing and try and support this fight. I do ultimately know that it's not going to go the greatest, but just making sure that it doesn't fall apart instantly is relatively important. This Hawatcher, however, is out of ammo now. Argus is just slowly but surely trundling it forward into melee. This unit of the Gondor Great Spears and a unit of Heavy Flathrum Shipwrights there routing. So my pikes and this unit of Gondor Great Spears are the only thing keeping this fight going. And even then, they'll be gone not too much later. I'm moving up my Javelins because, again, if I can just get some Javies into these guys, they're not going to feel too good about life. These Lambs and Nobles routing away from the Castles of the Eye. And again, pretty much everything that's left on the defender side is pretty elite, with the exception, I would say, of the Wain Archers and, well, the Hawatcher as well, but the Hawatcher's the Hawatch, so I don't really count that as that. And of course, the Range Guard of Gorgoroth are mid-tier units, I would say. However, Tomsake does still have all of his elites. That's not something we want to forget, and I've still got 3 units of Ones of Mithland, who I'm currently teeing off their limited ammo supply into the Azwar champions. These 2 units are already out, but of course this unit had a lower manpower count because of the Hawatcher, so it's going to take longer to get its ammo off, which is fortunate. I'm just staggering my sending in of the Ones of Mithland into this fight because, again, if I chucked everything in, I'm still worried this Hawatcher's got ammo and will just absolutely unload into 3.5 units of Ones of Mithland. This unit of Heavy Flathrum Shipwrights is just out of ammo now and is just going into melee against the Range Guard of Gorgoroth. That should be a fight that the Heavy Flathrum Shipwrights win, if we look at numbers and the fact that the Heavy Flathrum Shipwrights are just better than the Range Guard of Gorgoroth. These Heavy Flathrum Shipwrights I've just got here, I want to shoot them into the Azwar champions because they're going to be a nightmare to deal with. short of shooting them. You can see here that just shooting them is making them die so much quicker. Of course, the Wain archers also, they've got those little hooked hammers, so I believe they're... I think they're AP but low stats in melee, is what I think I've done with them. Now the mountain champions, these guys, I've just decided, screw it, I'll shoot them instead. Because again, they're still not a bad unit in the slightest, so the more of them that die, the better. You can see there, they're not dying too quickly. Loose formation is definitely saving them to a decent extent, but so is the shield most likely. You can see here, Wolfborn Fanatics ready to go into the fight. There's just so many of these Wainriders just waiting to engage. These heavy Flatham shipwrights are out of ammo. I'm just desperately going to charge them in to make sure that these guys don't find themselves outflanked. Because that is the Fountain Guard getting stuck in there. And they are already almost dead, which is not what you want to see. I'm surprised the ones of the Eye... There we go, they're starting to tee off into this front line now that some... well, far more elite troops are being committed. The Wain archers, of course, again, they will just die in droves to a unit like the ones of Midland. They're relatively low tier. They're not anything special in melee, so yeah, they're not gonna fare too well here. The Mountain Spear Guard, however, just being that bit more resilient, while they will likely still lose a one-on-one engagement against Warrens of Midland, they're not going to do so as badly as something like the Wain archers would. Simply because they are A, more potent, B, unbreakable, and C, they'd have javelins to get off beforehand as well. And they are more heavily armed as well, so they've got that going for them. Now this unit of Castellans of the Eye being charged in is not what I want to see. Heavy Flatham shipwrights, while they're not bad, they definitely won't fare well against a unit of the Castellan's caliber. Even these Ranger Guard of Gorgoroth are proven to be a slow target to grind their way through. But that said, you don't bring spears to deal with stuff quick, you bring them to just survive. I am moving a unit of Heavy Flatham archers in just for AP purposes. I've got Tunnel Stakes, Hallowed Knights of Ammon and Anwar coming in as well. So these guys, they will just absolutely wreck anything on this front line. But seeing that, where are these archpriests? There we go. Seeing that, Bilbo commits his archpriests. I wouldn't have moved the Hallowed Knights around the flank, to be honest. I would have just had them embedded in here, just grind their way through something like Castellans or Ranger Guard of Gorgoroth. Just doing something like that, I think, would have been perfect for them. But as it is, they're having to go one-on-one against the Archpriest of Anatar, which, while if it was a one-on-one, it would be a fight they win. Considering there's still Castellans and all of that jazz in there as well, it's not a fight that is likely to go their way. Even more archers getting ready to go into melee. We've got more Mountain Spear Guard here. I believe they're out of ammo now. We've got Wolfborn Fanatics. We've still got some Castellans. Still got the Inquisitors. Wardens of the Eye still with ammo. At this point, I think... Okay, it might not be just yet, but at this point I see that, hey, the other Hawach has gone. Let's move up my Arbny Earendil and Arbny Ecthelion. It's just elites. These guys will grind through stuff. And we've got a bunch of Gondor Sword Infantry just here waiting for the order. We've got the Wardens of Minas Ithil as well. Unit of Lambton Nobles. We've got Axemen of the Sarnak. We're not completely out of troops, but a decent chunk of what we have left is actually fighting on this front line. Right here. However, the same is also true, you would say, for Bilbo and Argus. they are slowly but surely running out of numbers. You can see here they've managed to bring it back a couple of percent, but not massively. But there's not really any of the heavy hitters for them that have been committed just yet, or have had a chance to be committed. While one of our heavy hitters, well, one of our heaviest hitters is slowly but surely going down. They're down to 21 from 35, which is, it's not exactly what you want to see, I would say. Well, my heavy Flatham shipwrights and archers are just desperately trying to hold this front line, just keep it together against the combined mights of archpriests, fanatics. I believe the inquisitors are in here now. We've got some castellans, some wardens, we've got some ranger guard. It's just a big mosh pit facing off against a much smaller, I wouldn't even say slightly more elite, I'd say just smaller mosh pit of our troops. Then this unit of Wardens of the Eye just teeing off into the same unit of Hallowed Knights. He's just tried to pull them off that front line and get them in here. Combined with Axemen of the Sarnak. We've got Arbnier Rendil, we've got Arbnier Thelion. So at this point it's just a case of all hands on deck. We are breaking through this middle choke point, whether it's the last thing we do. 7 Aswar champions remain. These Wayne archers going down. Mountain Spear Guard being committed. This is just a case of Bilbo and Argus are just desperately trying to hold on to these 2 choke points. You can see they're not doing a bad job at it whatsoever. They've managed to kill about 5% in the time we've killed, I think, 2. Like, it's not a bad 5% that they've killed here. Decent amount of Wardens of Mithland have dropped. And we're largely down to what Tunnel Snake has left in reserve. In fact, everything in reserve, I think, is Tunnel Snake. Very sure I've committed my second unit of heavy Flatham archers, just desperately trying to stop this front line from falling apart. I could really do with some reinforcements from Tunnel Snake right about now. And while, yeah, these Wolfborn fanatics will die, as will Castellans and Wardens. It's not going to be quick, and it's not a fight that 47 heavy Flatham archers will win, ultimately. With the support of 4 units of Gondor sword infantry and a unit of Lambda nobles, however, that's a fight that suddenly looks like it could become winnable. Now, it's not going to be easy at all, especially not with units like Inquisitors of the Eye and Archpriests of Anatar on the front line. But even if we do lose, it will be much more damaging for Bilbo and Argus here. Meanwhile, over on this side, it's just looking so much better. These Range Guard of Gorgoroth just slowly but surely going down. Same with these mountain units. Second unit of Hawatchers are going down. And this unit of Wardens of the Eye, Bilbo needs to get them moving quick and get these shots in. So these Arbnier Thelion, they're going to do work against unit like Mountain Spear Guard. Same with the Arbnier Arendil. Hallowed Knights of Amon Anwar will do pretty solid. With the addition of a unit of Mountain Champions and a unit of Castellans of the Eye, this front line is, at the very least, the left-hand side of this front line is not going anywhere particularly quickly. However, the place we're likely to break through is, of course, this left-hand side here, where there's only a few Mountain Spear Guard and some Hawatcher crew just defending it. Of course, once these Wardens of the Eye are done, you would expect them to commit to this side, or at the very least the centre of it, just to keep it going. These ones are Minister Thil now, of course, Tunnel Snake's general, they're just marching forward, presumably to get involved in this, but they could also be, but I actually think they go into this fight here, just to break through the centre, so we can develop that, we could develop that. and then this front line would just fall very soon after. I do have to admit, the Wardens and Castellans of the Eye are some of my favourite looking units in the game. Wardens of Mithlond probably take the cake for that, I would say. Just, I think they look so good. Same with the Heavy Flatram and Base Flatram, for that matter. Although the Heavy Flatram are basically just the Arankir limb from stone, but slightly it looks like they're retextured in terms of the armor color, and also, of course, they've got a new helmet. I believe at least it looks different. But yeah, the Heavy Flatram model does look good. In fact, it might actually be kit bashed using the Arankir limb as a base. But yeah, there we go. My general falls to the forces of Mordor. And of course, it's probably not going to bother me too much since, of course, I am Elven. If it was Gondor that happened to, I don't think these Gondor sword infantry would stick around for too long. I think that could actually have been GG's for the battle. If these guys fall and they're able to outflank this, while yeah, we are winning on this front line, if we got outflanked by whatever the heck is on this front line, we would not win this at all. And these Lambs and Nobles, Gondor sword infantry, like, if they stick around, they can definitely whittle this down. They wouldn't win, I don't think, but we wouldn't have to deal with 45 of the Archpriest of Anatar. We wouldn't have to deal with 98 Wardens of the Eye. We wouldn't have to deal with 154 Wolfborn Fanatics, for instance. We'd have to deal with much smaller numbers, which you would expect if we had to turn around. I could turn around my Wardens of Mithlond. In fact, what I'm doing here is I'm pulling my Omni Ecthelion away from this front line. So this front line, it looks manageable. While pulling them away might mean we lose this side of it. The center is looking exceptionally weak, and once that falls, we can... I mean, that said, if you charge the unit of Mountain Bowmen into the center, suddenly it's not as weak as it was. But even so, there's still 4 Hallowed Knights, still some Axemen of the Sarnak. Like, damage is going to get done to these guys. However, if we can get some quality over here, we can start dealing with these Castellans a bit quicker. Same with the Archpriests, and especially the Wolfborn Fanatics. They would go down so quick. And even so, these Inquisitors of the Eye, they're dying. I also feel safe to do so because Tomsake has just committed his... At least I think he's committed him. I could be wrong. But I'm fairly sure he's committed not too long ago his... Yeah, there we go. His Wardens of Minas Ithil there getting stuck in. So I felt relatively confident that this front line was definitely going to go our way in the end. We've got AP Spears who will just not die to these Wardens of the Eye, and not to a unit like the Mountain Spear Guard. Well, also Spears. Mountain Bowmen could cause issues just because of that AP. Especially to units like Gondor Great Spears, or even the higher tier Gondorian units like the Nimloth or Axemen of the Sarnak. They could cause some issues for. My Arbni Arendo are dying, but they're just holding, stopping these Castellans of the Eye and Mountain Champions from getting anywhere. While we just slowly but surely grind our way through the Mountain Bowmen. Then once the Mountain Bowmen are dead, I think that's just front wraps for this front line. This section of it, sure, it's starting to wrap round, but by the time they do so, these guys will be dead and just won't quite be worth it. The other thing I might have done would be pull these 56 Range Guard of Gorgoroth off and just desperately stick them like here. It might not do much, but it might be able to make it so that either this is done quicker or this is able to hold that for that extra like minute or so. That could be all important. Poor Axemen of the Sarnak there, just getting ran through by a sword. These heavy flattened shipwrights, they're just desperately trying to stop these castles of the eye from getting around. So the more, well, prone to flanking stuff like the Gondor Great Spears here, who are actually forming the basis of this front line, really. Just being able to stop these mountain bowmen from actually getting into melee with us is huge. These Fountain Guard and Nimloth, they were down to 34 a decent chunk of time ago, and they're still holding on. These mountain bowmen, they're dropping, not particularly quickly, but they are still going down. And of course, these Wardens of the Eye, they're going to hold on for a decent amount of time, but it's still not a winning fight for them. The only side they're winning on is this side, and even then, if they win, they'll have to deal with the rest of this, which I just don't see happening. Meanwhile, over here, while still I don't think this is a winning fight, considering there is 31 Archpriests of Anatar left. And my... where are you? Arboniac Thelion are slowly but surely dying. Like, yes, they're gonna get a ton of kills while they die. But it looks like the AP is just too much for the Arboniac Thelion to deal with. Like, however, there would be about 40 or 45 or so of these Archpriests of Anatar left if it wasn't for the Arboniac Thelion sacrifice, and there'd be more Wolfborn Fanatics, Range Guard as well. Like, the Arboniac Thelion are still killing stuff. Now over here, while they are wrapping around, it has unfortunately just opened themselves up to charges from the Pin of Galen Knights. So it's just going to be even more costly to deal with this than it originally was. And I've also turned this unit of Wardens of Midland over to make sure that this unit Castles of the Eye just doesn't make it. And this unit of Mountain Bowmen, it's just been pushed back because of the slightly higher mass that pikemen, well, polearm units possess. This unit of Wardens of the Eye, it's not dying quickly, but it is dying, and B, it's not making much headway at all. It will just slowly but surely go down. The only thing really keeping it alive is just that very heavy armor and the fact that the Wardens of Midland aren't particularly damaging. They're more something you commit to a front line to make sure it stays, as opposed to something you commit to make sure a front line falls, is probably the best way to describe it. The Arboniac Thelion, they are very, very whittled down, but they've managed to deal with a lot of these Wolfborn Fanatics, decent amount of Castles of the Eye as well. There's a lot of these guys that are just dead because I committed these guys to this front line, and it's also meant that these units like the Gondor Sword Infantry have died far slower. You can see here these Archpriests of Anatar are just grinding their way through the Gondor Sword Infantry like a hot knife through butter. Naturally, as I say that, none of the Gondor Sword Infantry die, but you can see here, these guys started at 158, maybe 4,000 frames ago, and they're down to 60. Not to mention the fact that most of the other units of Gondor Sword Infantry are going down as well. This cavalry is just cycle charging this unit of Range Guard of Gorgoroth, which is just very, very nice. It might not pick up kills especially quickly, but it's keeping 40 men off the front line. It will slowly but surely pick them off. If I was built where I'd almost say charge them, which is exactly what he's doing now. There we go. One of the knights drops. I reckon a second might follow. No, it just about makes it out. But this unit of Axemen of the Sarnak is now making their way to it. And they're charging into the Range Guard of Gorgoroth, as the Pinneth Galen Knights do. So the Range Guard of Gorgoroth just took about 12 losses there. They'll be dying at a decent pace because of the AP of the Axemen of the Sarnak as well. So this is not a good day for them. However, there is one Archpriest of Anatar just here. And he is going to make it a very, very tough day for these Axemen of the Sarnak here. At least you'd assume so. Maybe not. But yeah, with the collapse of this front line over here, I've just got some of my guys just making sure that this doesn't fall apart now. And just finishing off these ones of the eye here. While my ally in Tunnel Snake is just rushing stuff over here to kill everything. Basically, getting a downhill charge with Warrens and Minister Thiel. They will rip through Wolfborn Fanatics like they are paper. And even the Archpriests of Anatar won't thank them for this. They've been sufficiently weakened by the Gondor Sword Infantry, Lambden Nobles, my Flathram Archers, my Arbny Ecthelion. Just everything they fought has slowly but surely whittled them down to the point where they will die here. And yeah, while this bit of the front line does somewhat look like it will collapse, it probably won't, purely because of the fact that it's almost like, I don't want to say a crescent, it's almost horn shaped, so you've got this. And that just means that over here they're losing, but over here they've got plenty of men to keep it going. So it's not going anywhere. And when you consider the fact that there's a couple hundred men here, and 15 elves just waiting to charge down the hill at them, this battle is going to be over relatively soon. That is Argus' general dead, the Wainriders. Naturally have a vanilla Med 2 general model. Wouldn't have it any other way. Yeah, these Archpriests of Anatar, they're just sticking it out, grinding their way through Gondor Sword Infantry like it's nothing. And even some Inquisitors of the Eye there, with the general remaining in it, they're keeping it. They're still alive. This general's just going ham right now. Just absolutely sideswiped an elf. Just oof, poor guy. Just absolutely mullering everything that he comes across. He's up against the Lambden Noble. That Lambden Noble goes down. That's another elf that he's dealt with. He's just slowly but surely dealing with all of these guys. Just taking a little bit of time to rest here. Just there we go. Goes in for a hit. That Lambden Noble instantly bloodied up. But yeah, over here, they're finally dead. Those Wardens of the Eye are finally dead. Argus did decide to run one of his Mountain Spear Guard away. I know he did this because these guys don't route, so he intentionally ran this guy across the bridge. Just to be annoying, I guess. I mean, it did work. The psychological warfare it did was very upsetting. And still, these Archpriests of Anatar refuse to die. As does his general. His general just refuses to go down. He kills another Gondorian. I believe that was a great spear wielder. And he is just surrounded now. He kills an elf. Still, 4 Arben E Aarendil remain. This general is still alive. He just refuses to die. That's another Gondorian he's killed. He's just got like a 20 kill streak right here. It's nuts. But there we go. I believe that was an elf there that killed him. But yeah, with that as one Archpriest of Anatar, so let's just go into 6 times speed. While we wait for us to find Argus's final soldier, who is currently running over to the bridge. We send over some cav to deal with it, and I send over Glaive Guard just to make sure that the job gets finished. Then Argus's last soldier just fighting, just duking it out with these Pinnith Knights. And there we go. A close victory. You can see there just how small an army you bring as Lindon now. I had a full stack there. I only had 1,730 men. And almost 3,000 kills. Tunnel Snake taking the lead on the kills there. With 2,930 captives. I got just under 600. And if we take a look at what did the damage for me here, we can see Heavy Flatham Archers doing pretty solid, both over 100 kills. Wards of Mithlond doing somewhat disappointingly. I'm assuming that these two went up against those very elite soldiers at the end. This unit must have been the first unit to get committed, and of course this unit being another one that went up against elites, but just did slightly better. Or maybe I had still some Wayne Archers or something along those lines. Then Arbony Ecthelion and Earendel both getting 138 kills, neither outdoing the other. Apart from in Prisoner's Court, of course. If we also look here, we can see 22 prisoners, 5, 1, 1, 47 on this unit, Wardens of Mithlond. Then Heavy Flatham Shipwrights getting okay kills across the board. This one doing very disappointingly. As did this one, for that matter. These two doing pretty respectably, especially this unit getting 158 across kills and captives. Then Flatham Shipwrights. Well, Seaguard doing okay. Well, more than okay. 124 captives, 78 captives, and a bunch of kills for each of them. Flatham Shipwrights doing very well. Of course, these guys got committed early, so you'd expect them to. Heavy Flatham Glaive Guard also doing very well. Again, committed early, so if they didn't do well, questions would be asked. 113 kills on these guys, and then these guys with 336 kills and 41 captives. Just cheapest unit on the roster performing the greatest. However, again, all of those kills would have been against absolute chaff, so it is somewhat to be expected. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, leave a comment, show your support, subscribe if you're around here. While I won't upload that frequently, I try to, and with any luck, more videos will be coming soon. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.